For a long time, the galaxy had forgotten about Earth. Once the name humanity had echoed through the stars, both feared and respected. But that time had passed. The wars, the conflicts, the endless fights for survival had drained them. Slowly, humanity had turned inward, retreating from the galactic stage. They sealed their borders, shut down their colonies, and vanished into silence. To the other races, humanity became a fading legend, a tale told to frighten children or entertain soldiers in the quiet of space. The Terrans, they would whisper, were wild, unstoppable, dangerous. But that was centuries ago. The galaxy believed the humans had broken themselves with their own fire. Yet the truth was far more complex. Humanity was not gone. They were healing. Deep in the Sol system, beyond the calm glow of the sun, they rebuilt what was lost. Their cities shone beneath glass domes on Mars. Their fleets rested in hidden docks near the moons of Jupiter, and their scientists worked in silence. Humanity had learned from pain, learned patience, learned control. For generations they kept their promise. No interference, no war, no vengeance. The stars outside could fight and burn, but Earth would stay quiet. Peace, they thought, was the final strength they could give the galaxy. But peace in the galaxy was fragile, a delicate thread ready to break. Far beyond the Orion Arm, in a corner of space no one cared to visit, lay the planet Aurealis. It was small but beautiful. Oceans of pale green, clouds like silk, and cities carved from crystal. The people of Aurealis were gentle beings, artists, and thinkers. They had no armies, no weapons. They believed in kindness and knowledge. Then came the Zorthal Empire. They were conquerors, a reptilian species with burning eyes and cold hearts. They desired control over every world that shone with resources or hope. To them, Aurealis was nothing but another jewel to claim. They descended from the sky like shadows, their ships dark as iron, their weapons screaming through the air. In a single week, Aurealis fell, cities burned, oceans turned to ash, and the cries of the innocent echoed through the void. The Galactic Council watched, but did nothing. The Zorthal were too strong, too feared. Every empire looked away, pretending not to hear the screams of Aurealis, until one voice refused to die. A young Aurealian engineer, barely 20 cycles old, sent a final message into the stars. His name was Lyrian, and his hands shook as he spoke. To whoever can hear this, this is Aurealis. We are under attack. They are killing us. Please, someone help us. If humanity still lives, we beg you. Remember what it means to be human. The message drifted into the endless black. Lost. Perhaps forever. But fate had a way of choosing strange paths. The signal traveled for weeks, bouncing through debris fields and forgotten satellites until it reached a lonely outpost orbiting Pluto. There, a single Terran operator sat in silence, monitoring the void. When the message flickered onto his screen, he froze. The word help appeared in glowing letters, and then the face of a dying world. He stared at it for a long time. Then he whispered to himself, "They're calling us again." Within hours, the message was relayed to Sol Command, the beating heart of the Terran Federation. The great war room lit up with activity. Generals, admirals, and representatives gathered around the projection of Aurealis. The hologram showed cities crumbling, fires spreading, and people screaming. The silence in the room grew heavy, not with fear but with memory. Admiral Caravant stood among them. Her eyes were sharp, but behind them was pain, the kind only humans knew too well. She had been raised on stories of Earth's old wars, of sacrifice and loss, of a time when humanity had been the shield and sword of the helpless. She looked at the council, her voice steady but filled with emotion. 200 years we have watched, 200 years of silence, and yet even now they call for us, not as monsters, not as saviors, but as humans. Are we going to ignore that call? No one spoke. The counselors looked at one another, uncertain. They remembered the chaos humanity had once brought to the stars. but they also remembered what had followed: peace, freedom, hope. Admiral Vance turned toward the main display. The burning image of Aurealis filled the room. "They think we are gone," she said softly. "Let's remind them who we are." The order was given. Across the solar system, alarms sounded. Hidden bases lit up for the first time in centuries. Massive hangars opened, revealing fleets of sleek black ships, the Terran dreadnoughts. Soldiers who had trained in silence prepared for launch. The sleeping giant was awake again, and for the first time in generations, Earth spoke to the stars. "This is the United Terran Fleet," Admiral Vance declared. "We have received your call. To the people of Aurealis, hold on. Help is coming." The galaxy, still unaware of what was stirring in the dark, carried on as usual. But in the cold depths of space, engines flared to life, and humanity's forgotten strength began to rise once more. The storm had begun to move, and somewhere, across the endless stars, the galaxy shuddered in not yet knowing that the silence of Earth had finally ended. The message from Aurealis had barely faded from the screens when the full reality of the galaxy's indifference sank into the hearts of humanity. For centuries they had stayed silent, choosing observation over action, patience over war. But now, in that desperate cry for help, they heard something they could not ignore. It was not just a call. It was a test. In the grand war room of Sol Command, the hum of energy and the faint vibration of engines under the surface created a tense rhythm. Every eye turned toward the holographic display that showed Aurealis in flames. Generals leaned over consoles, their fingers tight against control panels. Scientists muttered quietly about planetary shields and defense mechanisms. Politicians shifted in their seats, unused to seeing a Terran fleet actually mobilize. Admiral Cara Vance stood at the center, her posture straight, her voice calm yet commanding. She had seen destruction before. She had studied the old human wars, read every account of what Terrans were capable of. Yet nothing had prepared her for the surge of emotion she felt at that moment. She looked around the room, her eyes meeting each of the council members. "Do we wait?" she asked, her voice low but cutting through the tension. "Or do we remind the galaxy why they should never forget humanity again?" Silence answered her. Vance's mind wandered to her childhood stories, tales of Earth's old warriors who had fought not for conquest, but for survival, for justice, for honor. She remembered her father, a former pilot who had told her, "The universe respects only strength, but it remembers mercy even longer." Those words were etched into her heart. And now the moment had come to show both, strength and mercy. Orders were given and the fleet began to stir. Hidden hangars that had lain dormant for decades opened like awakening jaws. Sleek dreadnoughts heavy with advanced weaponry glided into the sunlight. Smaller fighter craft scurried around the larger ships, engines sparking as they checked systems. The Terran Navy, once thought extinct, now stood ready. On Earth itself, millions of people paused. Messages ran across every system. Prepare for deployment. Humanity is answering the call. Families held their breath, proud and fearful, knowing that the galaxy was about to see what humans had been preparing for in silence. Children watched the skies, imagining the ships rising, imagining heroes returning. Older generations remembered old battles, old losses, and hoped that humanity would not repeat the mistakes of its past. In orbit above Mars, the first Terran War Council convened. Admiral Vance presided over a room of commanders, each representing different fleets hidden across the solar system. Holograms projected Aurealis, the Zorthal Armada, and potential battle strategies. "They think we are gone," Vance said again, her hand sweeping across the display. "They believe we have forgotten our own strength. They believe we will not fight for the weak. Let us show them the truth, not as monsters, but as humans." A hush filled the room, then slowly nods came. Determination replaced fear. Each commander understood what was at stake. This was more than a battle for Aurealis. It was a declaration. Humanity was no longer hiding. Humanity would never again be dismissed. Beyond strategy and weapons, humanity began to awaken in spirit. Across the colonies, way from Titan to Luna, from the asteroid belts to the hidden outposts near Neptune, engineers, pilots, and soldiers worked tirelessly. Every ship was checked, every weapon calibrated, every crew member trained for a war that had already begun in their hearts. Humanity had learned patience over centuries, but now that patience had turned to resolve. Meanwhile, in the outer systems, alien observers noticed movement. Rumors spread quickly through the galaxy. The humans were mobilizing. Some laughed, thinking it a bluff. Others trembled, remembering the stories of Terran might. In the shadows, enslaved peoples whispered in hope. Perhaps they will come for us after all. Admiral Vance walked the deck of the TSF Liberty, her flagship. The ship thrummed beneath her feet, a living pulse of Terran engineering. She stopped by the viewport and looked out at the dark stars. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of the responsibility. Aurealis' cries were not just numbers. They were lives, families, and dreams. Humanity had stayed silent too long, and now it was time to repay that silence with action. Her voice softened as she addressed her officers. We are not going there to conquer. We are not going to destroy for power. We are going to protect. Every life matters. Remember that. The galaxy has long feared humans. Let it now remember why. The first wave of Terran ships ignited their engines, leaving behind the quiet of their hidden bases. As they ascended toward the stars, the fleet formed an unbroken line of metal and light, a promise of justice and strength. Pilots felt the thrill of purpose in their veins. Soldiers felt courage replace fear. Humanity was awake, and nothing could stop the rising tide. As the ships left the Sol system, a single thought echoed through the minds of all who watched. The galaxy had believed humans were gone. But the humans had only been waiting, biding their time. And now, with every engine roar, every gleaming hull, and every determined heartbeat, the galaxy would soon see the return of its most underestimated force. Above all, Admiral Vance whispered to herself, the storm has begun. Let them remember the humans, and with that, humanity surged into the stars, no longer silent, no longer hidden, and ready to show the galaxy the strength it had always possessed, tempered by wisdom, driven by compassion, and burning with the courage of a species that had learned the cost of indifference. The awakening of Earth had begun. The Terran fleet entered the Aurealis system in perfect formation, their black hulls glinting in the distant light of a dying sun. The once peaceful planet below burned under the relentless assault of the Zorthal Empire. Cities that had stood for centuries were reduced to rubble, and smoke climbed like black fingers into the thin atmosphere. On every screen, Terran soldiers saw the faces of the innocent. Families huddled in terror, children crying for parents lost, artists and scholars fleeing through the ruins. Admiral Cara Vance stood on the bridge of her flagship, the TSF Liberty, her jaw tight, eyes scanning the battlefield. For centuries, humanity had avoided war, choosing observation over interference. But now silence was no longer an option. The galaxy had abandoned Aurealis, and humanity would not. Target their main fleet, she ordered. Protect the civilians at all costs. No one is left behind. Her voice carried calm authority, yet beneath it lay the fire of centuries-long restraint finally unleashed. Pilots, soldiers, and engineers obeyed without question, moving as one, a symphony of precision and power. When the Zorthal fleet saw the humans arrive, they laughed. Massive ships bristling with weapons filled the void before them. The humans, hissed the Zorthal commander, his scaled face twisting into a sneer. We were told you were extinct. You think you can stop us? The first Terran transmission cut through the comms. This is Admiral Vance of the United Terran Fleet. You will withdraw immediately. Do not harm the innocent. Humanity is watching. The Zorthal laughed again, a harsh grating sound that echoed across the void. They had fought many species, but none like humans. To them, Terrans were relics, a forgotten threat. They underestimated the storm about to descend upon them. Then the sky erupted. Terran rail cannons tore through the first Zorthal cruisers, their energy beams slicing ships in half before the enemy could even react. Fighters streaked across space, weaving between enemy fire and delivering precision strikes that shattered the Zorthal formations. The humans fought not for conquest, not for revenge, but for lives. Lives they had promised to protect. On Aurealis, civilians looked up from hiding places, terrified and awed. In the distance, the flashes of human weapons lit the sky, a silent promise that someone had come for them. They had long feared that no one would answer their cries. But now hope returned, fragile yet undeniable. Amid the chaos, Admiral Vance watched the battle unfold. She saw the courage of her pilots as they faced overwhelming odds. She felt the determination of soldiers as they deployed exo-armored units onto the planet, protecting the innocent from Zorthal ground forces. Each human movement was precise, every strike calculated, every life valued. "Remember this," Vance murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "This is who we are. Not monsters. Not conquerors, protectors." The Zorthal, unprepared for such organized fury, began to falter. Their largest warships fell in a matter of minutes, and their fighter squadrons were decimated by superior Terran tactics. Yet even as victory approached, the humans did not exult. Their focus remained on the lives they were saving. Vance ordered boarding teams onto Zorthal vessels, not to destroy indiscriminately, but to disable weapons, evacuate prisoners, and capture key commanders. Every action reflected the discipline and strategy humanity had honed over centuries. It was a reminder to the galaxy that humans were not merely strong. They were clever, compassionate, and relentless when justice demanded it. Amid the battle, a young Aurelian child appeared on a rooftop watching the humans fight. Her eyes were wide, filled with tears and disbelief. She had never seen anything like it. Her parents had been lost in the first wave of attacks, but now she understood that someone had come for her people. She whispered a single word, almost a prayer. Humans. The Terran fleet pushed forward, each victory a step closer to the heart of the Zorthal operation. But Admiral Vance knew the battle was far from over. The Zorthal would not surrender easily. They were cunning, ruthless, and desperate. Still, humanity's resolve was unbreakable. "We will not stop," Vance said to her bridge crew. "No one will die under our watch if we can prevent it." The galaxy may have forgotten compassion, but humanity never will. Hours turned into days as the fleet pressed on. The Zorthal scrambled reinforcements, but each attempt was met with precision and strategy that left them reeling. Systems fell, ships exploded in brilliant flashes of blue and white energy, and slowly the tide began to turn. The first contact, once feared and dreaded, became a testament to human determination. They did not fight for glory or conquest. They fought because someone had cried for help and the humans had answered. By the end of the engagement, the Zorthal fleet was scattered, their main forces shattered. Aurealis, though scarred, was no longer completely lost. Fires still burned, but survivors began to emerge from hiding. They saw the Terran ships hovering above like silent guardians, their shadows casting hope across the broken cities. Admiral Vance watched from her bridge, exhaustion and resolve mingling in her expression. The battle had been won, but the war was only beginning. Yet in that moment she allowed herself a single thought. Humanity had returned. Not as a forgotten myth, not as a relic of past wars, but as a force that could shape the galaxy. One life, one world, and one act of justice at a time. The galaxy had underestimated humans for too long, and now it would begin to remember. The victory at Aurealis spread faster than any fleet could fly. Across light years, across systems and empires, news traveled. Humans had returned. At first it was met with disbelief. Messages flickered from one corner of the galaxy to another, holographic communications carrying the word of Terran might. Many laughed, thinking it a trick. Others trembled, remembering the old legends of humanity. of wars fought with fire, cunning, and unbreakable resolve. In the Galactic Council, chambers filled with alien representatives buzzed with tension. The core worlds, the sectors of the Outer Rim, even neutral trading alliances all watched the reports in awe and fear. Hollow images of the battle at Aurealis flickered on the walls. Cities shattered, Zorthal warships destroyed in seconds, Terran fighters weaving through impossible odds. Every display told the same story. Humanity had risen from silence, and they were unstoppable when driven by purpose. "This cannot be," hissed a counselor from the Arvian sector, a species with translucent skin and pulsating veins. "We thought they were gone. We thought the Terrans had faded into legend." "They have returned," another whispered, eyes wide with fear. "And they are different, controlled, strategic, ruthless in their precision." Across distant systems, the enslaved and oppressed saw the news and dared to hope. The humans were not coming for conquest. They were coming for justice. Rumors spread like wildfire. Entire Zorthal supply lines had been obliterated, enslaved Aurealians freed, and the Terrans had not taken a single life unnecessarily. Across the galaxy, species that had never trusted one another began to whisper the same word: hope. Back on Aurealis, survivors wandered among the ruins. Their fear slowly turned to awe as Terran teams helped rebuild shelters, carried the wounded, and restored water and power to broken cities. Soldiers clad in blue and silver exo-armor smiled gently at children, offered food to the starving, and protected families as if they were their own. It was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, power tempered by care. Admiral Kara Vance observed it all from the TSF Liberty, hovering above the planet. She understood the subtlety of the victory. Destruction alone would have made humans feared, but restraint, precision, and mercy, that would make the galaxy remember. "Power without purpose is nothing," she murmured to her first officer, "but power with purpose can change everything." In the weeks that followed, the Terran fleet moved like a measured storm through the nearby sectors. Pirate fleets were scattered, tyrannical governors overthrown, and enslaved colonies liberated. Every encounter carried the same pattern. Humans fought with skill, strength, and mercy. The stories of these actions traveled faster than light, transmitted through trade networks, fleeing ships, and terrified Zorthal soldiers desperate to report the truth. Among the Zorthal themselves, panic spread. Their leaders had laughed when humans first arrived. They had underestimated the skill, determination, and heart of a species they thought had gone extinct. Entire squadrons refused orders, surrendering to humans rather than continue a fight they now realized was hopeless. The core worlds began to shift their policies. Some sent envoys secretly to Terran positions hoping for alliance or at least mercy. Others strengthened defenses fearing the full return of human power. But even their fear was tinged with respect. Humanity was no longer just a species. It was a force that commanded the galaxy's attention, and yet the most powerful effect of all was the ripple of courage among the oppressed. On dozens of planets, beings who had once cowered beneath tyrants and slavers now dared to rise. Rebels formed alliances inspired by the Terran example. Citizens took to the streets demanding freedom, and secret movements began whispering of a new hope. If humans can fight for justice, perhaps we can too. Vance knew the delicate balance of this awakening. Power could corrupt if not guided by purpose. The galaxy had already forgotten that strength should serve compassion. Humanity's challenge was not just to defeat the Zorthal. It was to prove that strength and mercy could exist together. Every battle, every rescue, every act of protection sent a message louder than cannon fire. We fight for life. We fight for justice. We fight because it is the right thing to do. On Aurealis, as children began to play among the ruins, adults looked skyward at the hovering Terran ships and felt something they had not dared feel in years: safety. The presence of humanity brought warmth into hearts frozen by fear, a reminder that in the galaxy's darkest corners, Courage could shine brighter than any weapon. Even distant stars seemed to hold their breath. Traders and explorers whispered among themselves. Soldiers of other empires recalculated their strategies, uncertain how to face a species that could wield both unmatched strength and unshakable morality. The galaxy, for the first time in centuries, understood one undeniable truth. Humans were back, and they were not just here to fight. They were here to remind every being, enslaved, oppressed or free, that one species could carry the weight of justice across the stars. That they could rise from silence, endure centuries of watching and return not as conquerors, but as a living testament to courage, hope, and the unyielding strength of a species that refused to be forgotten. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge, looking at the galaxy spread before her. In every system, she sensed the stirring of awareness, the trembling of fear, and the awakening of hope. Humanity had not returned for revenge. They had returned to show the galaxy the full measure of their spirit. "Let them watch," she whispered, eyes burning with resolve. "Let them see. Let them remember. Humanity is here, and the galaxy will never forget again." The stars seemed to shimmer with possibility. Somewhere deep in the void, enslaved planets dared to dream. In every corner of space, civilizations reconsidered their understanding of power. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy, whether ready or not, had begun to change. Victory at Aurealis had brought hope, but it had not come without a price. The Terran fleet, though triumphant, had seen the harsh reality of war. For every Zorthal ship destroyed, a Terran pilot fell. For every city saved, countless soldiers carried the scars of battle. Humanity had returned with full strength, but it was a strength that demanded sacrifice. Admiral Cara Vance walked the corridors of the TSF Liberty, her boots echoing against the metal floors. Around her, medical teams tended to the wounded. Some were burned, some broken, some simply exhausted from the months of combat. Vance paused by a row of recovering pilots, young faces pale under the harsh lights, eyes haunted by what they had seen. She knelt beside one, a young man who had barely survived a boarding mission on a Zorthal cruiser. "You did everything you could," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You fought not for glory but for life. That is what makes us human." He looked up at her, trembling. "Admiral, so many died. I don't know if I can—" Vance held his gaze, unwavering. "I know, none of us can forget, but every life we save, every world we protect, makes the cost worthwhile. Pain is part of strength, and strength is our duty." Beyond the ship, across the Aurealis system, battlefields still smoked. Entire fleets of Zorthal had been annihilated, yet the Terran forces were not immune. Ships that had been humanity's pride now floated in shattered fragments, their crews lost forever. The echo of the TSF Horizon's destruction haunted the fleet. The flagship had sacrificed itself to save a convoy of refugees. Its captain, crew, and soldiers had become legends in an instant, their last transmission a testament to Terran courage. "We do not fight for revenge. We fight so no one else feels fear like this again." Vance remembered hearing it over the comms. Her eyes had filled with tears, though she had not allowed them to fall in front of her crew. The galaxy saw humans as merciless warriors, but in reality every strike carried the weight of conscience. Every act of power was balanced by compassion. On Aurealis, survivors slowly emerged from the ruins, but their relief was tinged with grief. Families who had lost everything clung to one another, tears mingling with soot. Terran soldiers helped them, guiding them to shelters, providing food and comforting the children. Every smile forced from a weary human face was a reminder that strength alone could not heal all wounds. Yet even in mourning, hope glimmered. Pilots spoke quietly of the bravery of fallen comrades. Engineers honored those who had died maintaining the ships, and soldiers whispered stories of courage during the darkest hours. Humanity's return was not only a display of power but of sacrifice. The galaxy was learning. Strength without cost was meaningless, but strength born with heart could inspire entire civilizations. The Zorthal, scattered and broken, retreated into the void. But the humans did not gloat. They did not dance in celebration. Each victory was a reminder of what had been lost. Each triumph weighed with memory. Vance's mind kept returning to Aurealis, to the screams, the fear, the lives that could have been saved if action had come sooner. Humanity had waited, observed, and calculated for centuries, but the moment of mercy had arrived too late for some. In the midst of this, a young Aurealian named Lyrian approached a group of Terran soldiers, eyes wide with gratitude. "You saved us," he said, voice trembling. "All of you. Humanity is something I never imagined." Vance overheard him and allowed herself a small smile. She knew the cost and the lives lost, the pain endured. But in his words, she saw the truth. Humanity's return was not only about power, but about hope. That hope was worth every scar, every tear, every sacrifice. Yet Vance also knew that the cost was not over. Across the galaxy, other worlds suffered under tyranny. Other species awaited rescue, and the Zorthal would return. The fleet had shown its strength, but strength alone could not guarantee peace. Humanity had to endure. Endure loss, endure fear, endure the heavy weight of responsibility. "We will pay the price," Vance told herself, looking out over the stars. "And we will do it because no one else can or will. That is what makes us human. That is why the galaxy will remember us." At night, aboard the Liberty, the fleet paused. Stars twinkled above the silent void, reflecting in the eyes of soldiers who had witnessed destruction and mercy alike. They wrote letters to families, shared quiet meals, and remembered friends lost in the battles. Every laugh was fragile, every sigh heavy, but the spirit of humanity remained unbroken. The cost of strength was immense, yet necessary. Humanity had returned to the galaxy not as conquerors but as guardians, powerful, precise, and unyielding. And with every life saved, with every battle fought with honor, they reminded the galaxy of a simple truth. Real strength was measured not in fear, but in courage, compassion, and sacrifice. Admiral Vance stood once more on the bridge, looking at the survivors of Aurealis below. Fires still burned, but hope was rekindling. She knew the road ahead would demand more of her and her fleet, but humanity had never feared responsibility. They had endured centuries of doubt, isolation, and observation. Now they were awake, and they would carry the cost of their strength with pride. "We will fight," she whispered. "We will endure. And we will protect." That is what humanity is. The galaxy watched, some in fear, some in awe, and some in hope. Humanity had returned. They were strong. They were compassionate. And they were willing to pay the price for justice. The battle had taught one undeniable truth. Power alone could not define humans. But power with heart, with sacrifice, restraint, and courage would make the galaxy remember them forever. The Zorthal Prime Fortress loomed like a dark crown in the void, a monstrous structure built around the remains of a dying star. Its surface burned with unnatural energy, massive turrets bristling with weapons capable of annihilating entire fleets. This was the heart of the Zorthal Empire, the place from which they had planned countless invasions, the command center of cruelty that had enslaved worlds and silenced countless voices. And now, the Terran fleet stood at its doorstep, engines humming, weapons ready, and hearts steeled. Admiral Cara Vance stared at the fortress through the bridge viewport. She could feel the weight of every life lost, every world shattered, every cry for help that had brought humanity to this moment. Her crew looked to her, waiting for guidance, and she knew the decisions she made now would echo across history. "This is it," she said softly, but her voice carried through the ship. "Every strike, every move must be for life. We do not destroy because we hate. We destroy because we must protect. Humanity does not bow to fear. We stand for the weak, the innocent, and the just." The fleet moved as one, entering the fortress's orbit. Zorthal defenses activated immediately, unleashing torrents of plasma and energy missiles. The first waves of Terran fighters dodged, dived, and returned fire with surgical precision. Ships weaved between deadly beams, shields flaring under immense pressure. Every maneuver spoke of discipline and centuries of preparation. But even with skill, the battle was brutal. Terran ships exploded in blinding flashes, and screams of the fallen echoed through the comm channels. Vance felt the pain of each loss, the sting of sacrifice that came with wielding power responsibly. Yet she pressed forward, guiding her fleet with calm determination. Below the fortress, boarding teams deployed. Human soldiers, clad in exo-armor and armed with advanced weapons, moved through corridors filled with traps, ambushes, and desperate Zorthal defenders. Every step was calculated, every decision weighed. The goal was not annihilation. It was to end the fight with the least possible loss of life while neutralizing the enemy. Amid the chaos, small acts of heroism shone brightly. One soldier carried a wounded Zorthal child to safety, defying the enemy and risking his own life. Another used the fortress-owned systems to seal corridors, preventing enemy reinforcements from reaching the front lines. Humanity's strength was undeniable, but it was guided by compassion, intelligence, and moral courage. Days passed in the blur of battle. The fortress's turrets fell one by one, its shields collapsed, and finally, the main command center became vulnerable. Vance directed the flagship to strike the final blow. Energy surged, weapons fired, and the fortress trembled. Massive explosions rippled through the structure, and at last the fortress began to crack. "Focus on evacuating survivors," Vance ordered. "We do not destroy those who cannot defend themselves." From the wreckage, slaves and prisoners of the Zorthal emerged, blinking against the light of freedom. Terran soldiers guided them to safety, offering aid and reassurance. Humanity had not come to conquer. They had come to liberate, to show that strength without mercy was meaningless. In the final moments, the fortress groaned and fractured, a brilliant storm of light and metal. Vance watched from her bridge as the remnants collapsed into the dying star, a violent but necessary end. The cost had been high, but the message was clear. No empire could stand against humanity when they fought for justice. When silence fell, the fleet hovered in orbit, engines idling, crews exhausted yet filled with awe. The Zorthal had been defeated, their fortress destroyed, and the galaxy witnessed humanity's might tempered with morality. For the first time in centuries, a single species had changed the balance of power not through fear, but through courage and compassion. Vance allowed herself a deep breath. She thought of Borealis, of the lives saved, and of the soldiers who had given everything. The galaxy would remember this day, not just as a display of power, but as a testament to what humanity truly represented. "This is our message to the stars," Vance said over the comms, her voice carrying across the fleet and into the void. "We are not here to dominate. We are here to remind you that strength is not in destruction, but in protection. Humanity fights for life. Humanity fights for justice. Remember this." The survivors of the fortress looked on in awe. Even the Zorthal, who had once laughed at the humans, now bowed in respect, not out of fear, but in recognition of a power that combined intellect, courage, and heart. The galaxy shuddered, finally understanding the full measure of humanity's return. Above the wreckage, the stars seemed to shine brighter. Ships repaired themselves, wounded soldiers were tended to, and the liberated began to plan their lives anew. Humanity had shown what true strength meant: the courage to fight, the wisdom to act with restraint, and the heart to save those who could not save themselves. Admiral Vance stood alone on the bridge for a moment, looking at the stars. Every life lost, every tear shed, every sacrifice made had led to this moment. Humanity had fulfilled its promise. Not through terror, not through conquest, but through action guided by justice. "We are awake," she whispered, "and the galaxy will never forget." The Terran fleet, battered but unbroken, drifted into the void. Silence fell across the system, a calm after the storm, and somewhere across countless light years, Other species began to understand the truth. Humanity had returned not as a forgotten myth, but as a force that would shape the destiny of the stars. The final battle was won, but the echo of humanity's strength, tempered with heart, would resonate through the galaxy forever. The battle was over. The Zorthal Prime Fortress lay in ruins, its twisted metal and shattered hulls floating like bones in the void. Fires burned on Aurealis, but life had returned to the cities. The people of the planet emerged cautiously from hiding, blinking at the sky, their hearts trembling with relief and disbelief. Humanity had come, humanity had fought, and the galaxy had witnessed it. Admiral Kara Vance stood on the bridge of the TSF Liberty, looking down at Aurealis. She could see the survivors gathering in the streets, holding hands, helping one another rebuild. Children laughed, running through the streets where shadows of death had once loomed. Adults embraced, tears flowing freely. Humanity had delivered more than power. They had brought hope. But the victory was not without cost. Ships lay in pieces. Pilots and soldiers were gone forever, and even those who survived carried the weight of grief. Vance felt it in every corner of the fleet, in every weary face she passed. Yet even in exhaustion there was pride. Every loss had been meaningful. Every sacrifice a step toward justice. Humanity had proven its strength not through domination, but through courage, compassion, and unyielding will. "We have done what we came to do," Vance said quietly to her first officer. "But our work is not finished. There are still worlds in need. There are still lives to protect." Beyond Aurealis, the galaxy was changing. News of humanity's return spread like a wave of light through the stars. Every empire, every council, every trading guild began to reconsider what they knew about humans. Once feared as wild, unpredictable conquerors, humans were now respected, admired even so for their balance of power and morality. The stories of their actions spread across countless systems. The Terrans who saved Aurealians, who disabled Zorthal weapons instead of killing recklessly, who carried refugees through the void to safety. In the core sectors, leaders whispered with unease. Humanity had reminded the galaxy that strength alone was not enough. Only strength guided by conscience could shape the future. Fear mingled with awe as civilizations realized that humans were no longer a distant legend. They were here, and they had changed the rules. On Aurealis, Vance walked among the survivors for the first time. She watched the children touch the Terran exo-armor with wide-eyed wonder. She saw adults rebuilding homes with Terran assistance. She heard stories of bravery, of Terran soldiers carrying the wounded through burning streets, of engineers restoring power and water to the broken cities. Every act, every gesture confirmed what she already knew. Humanity had returned to the stars not as conquerors, but as protectors. Among the liberated, one young Aurelian, Lyrian, approached Vance. His eyes shone with gratitude, yet there was also something deeper and understanding. "You fought for us," he said softly. "Not for reward, not for glory. You fought because it was right." Vance smiled, a mixture of pride and sorrow in her expression. "That is what it means to be human," she said. "We fight for life, for justice, and for those who cannot defend themselves. Power is meaningless if it is not used wisely." Above them, the stars shone in silent approval. The galaxy itself seemed to recognize the magnitude of the moment. Ships of other species that had once ignored Aurealis now looked to humanity for guidance, for hope, for courage. Entire civilizations began to reconsider their alliances, their strategies, and their understanding of strength. In the weeks that followed, the Terran fleet helped rebuild devastated worlds, liberated enslaved populations, and shared knowledge and technology to prevent future oppression. Humans did not seek control, they sought balance. Every act of mercy, every gesture of aid rippled through the galaxy, inspiring others to rise against injustice. Vance often stood on the bridge of the Liberty, staring into the stars. She thought of the lives lost, the ships destroyed, the sacrifices made. Yet in that quiet reflection, she also felt hope. Hope that the galaxy had learned something vital. that power was not measured by fear, but by courage, compassion, and the willingness to protect the weak. The galaxy has seen our strength, she said to herself, but more importantly, it has seen our heart. Far beyond the Aurealis system, whispers traveled to the furthest corners of the galaxy. Stories of humanity's return spread to enslaved worlds, to distant colonies, to species that had never dreamed of freedom. In hushed voices, beings dared to dream again, imagining a universe where justice could prevail, where courage could triumph, where hope was not lost. And in every corner, one thought resonated like a pulse through space. Humanity had returned. Humanity had shown its full strength, and the galaxy had shuddered, not with fear, but with awakening. Admiral Vance watched the sun rise over Aurealis's shattered horizon. Smoke and fire still lingered, but so did life, laughter, and rebuilding. She felt the weight of centuries of waiting lift, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. Humanity had endured exile, ridicule, and forgetfulness. Now it had reminded the galaxy of its potential, its heart, and its unyielding spirit. "We are here," Vance whispered, looking to the stars, "and we will never be forgotten." Above them, the Terran ships floated like guardians in the void. Below, the galaxy stirred. Planets once silent now held voices of hope. Systems once oppressed now dared to dream. And everywhere, in the hearts of those who had witnessed the return of humanity, a single truth became clear. Strength alone could destroy. But strength with heart could change everything. The galaxy had shuddered. Humanity had spoken, and the stars would never forget the day humans returned. Not as conquerors, not as monsters, but as the protectors the universe had long needed.